cheating wife wanted to open our marriage, but later regretted it all when I took savage revenge. Hey Reddit. My wife, Emma, and I had been married for 8 years, and I always believed we had a strong, loving relationship. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but nothing ever seemed significant enough to make me question her loyalty. That changed one evening when Emma sat me down and told me she wanted to have a serious conversation. She looked nervous, avoiding eye contact as she fidgeted with her hands. I assumed it was about work or finances, but what came out of her mouth completely blindsided me. She said she wanted to explore the idea of opening our marriage. My initial reaction was disbelief. I asked her to explain, hoping there was some misunderstanding. She said she felt like our relationship had grown stagnant and that she wanted to experience more without giving up what we had. Her words felt like a dagger to my chest. I asked her if there was someone else, and she swore up and down that there wasn't. She insisted this was about her personal growth and that it would strengthen our marriage. I wasn't convinced. Deep down, I felt like there was more to the story, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof. Over the next few days, I wrestled with my emotions. I considered therapy, compromises, anything to avoid this drastic change. But Emma was relentless. She kept bringing up articles and anecdotes about couples who thrived after opening their marriages. She painted it as this enlightened, modern way of loving someone. It felt manipulative, but I didn't want to be the controlling husband who stifled her individuality. After weeks of arguments, tears, and sleepless nights, I reluctantly agreed, though my gut told me I was making a huge mistake. Emma wasted no time. Within days, she started going out more often, dressing differently, and spending more time on her phone. She claimed she was just talking to friends or meeting people for harmless dates, but her behavior screamed otherwise. One night, I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower. What I found confirmed my worst fears. She had been sexting a coworker, a guy named Ryan, for weeks, if not months. Their messages were explicit and left no doubt that they had already crossed every line imaginable. I was furious, but instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to play the long game. If she wanted to open our marriage, then I was going to make sure she regretted it. I started by agreeing to her terms enthusiastically. I told her I wanted to explore as well and began making profiles on dating apps. At first, she seemed surprised, maybe even a little uneasy, but she hid it well under a mask of encouragement. She probably thought I wouldn't actually go through with it. What she didn't expect was that I'd attract attention. Within days, I started chatting with a woman named Sarah, who was beautiful, smart, and funny. We hit it off immediately, and I made sure to let Emma know every detail. I would casually mention my plans with Sarah, how excited she seemed to meet me, and how well we clicked. Emma tried to hide her jealousy, but I could see it eating away at her. She began asking more questions about Sarah, prying for details, and trying to gauge how serious I was. When I finally went out with Sarah, I made a point to come home late and act distant. Emma was waiting for me, pretending to be asleep, but I knew she had been crying. Over the next few weeks, I continued seeing Sarah, while Emma's so-called dates with Ryan seemed to dwindle. She became more clingy, trying to initiate conversations and intimacy with me, but I kept her at arm's length. The tables had turned, and she didn't like it one bit. Then came the breaking point. Sarah invited me to a weekend getaway, and I decided to go all in. I told Emma about the trip, packing my bags right in front of her while she stood there, speechless. She didn't say a word until the night before I left, when she finally broke down. She begged me not to go, saying she felt like she was losing me. I calmly reminded her that this was her idea and that I was simply following the rules she set. The weekend with Sarah was incredible, but it wasn't just about revenge anymore. Sarah and I genuinely connected on a level I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt appreciated and desired. When I returned home, Emma was a mess. She had barely eaten, her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She admitted she had made a mistake and that opening our marriage was the worst decision she had ever made. She begged me to close it and go back to how things were. But I wasn't ready to forgive and forget. I told her we needed to take a break to figure out what we really wanted. I moved into the guest room and started focusing on myself. I hit the gym, spent more time with friends, and continued seeing Sarah casually. Emma, on the other hand, became a shell of her former self. She tried everything to win me back, cooking my favorite meals, leaving me heartfelt notes, and even suggesting therapy, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook. One evening, I decided to confront her about Ryan. I laid out all the evidence I had gathered, from her texts to the photos she thought she had deleted. She broke down, admitting everything and apologizing profusely. She claimed she had ended things with him and that she realized she never wanted anyone else but me. Her tears and apologies felt hollow, but part of me wondered if she was truly remorseful or just desperate to fix the mess she had created. I told her I needed time to think, but in reality, I was already planning my next move. I wasn't just going to let her off the hook, I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices. I started gathering financial records, reviewing our assets, and consulting with a lawyer. If things escalated, I wanted to be prepared. Emma noticed my distant behavior and grew increasingly paranoid. She started accusing me of wanting a divorce, which wasn't far from the truth. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in our home became unbearable. Emma was walking on eggshells, constantly trying to please me, while I maintained my calm, calculated demeanor. I wanted her to truly understand what it felt like to lose everything, to regret every choice that led her to this point. And just when she thought things couldn't get worse, I decided to drop the bombshell. I sat her down and told her I had been seriously considering a future with Sarah. Her face went pale as I explained how happy Sarah made me and how I wasn't sure if I could ever trust Emma again. She begged me to reconsider, promising to do whatever it took to fix things, but I told her I needed more time to make a decision. As I write this, Emma is doing everything in her power to salvage our marriage, but I'm not sure if it's enough. Part of me wants to forgive her and move on, but another part feels like this is just the beginning of her punishment. After all, she wanted to open our marriage, and now she has to live with the consequences. As the days passed, I remained firm in my decision to take time to process everything. Emma was relentless in her attempts to prove her remorse. She started waking up early to prepare breakfast, something she had never done before, and left little notes around the house, apologizing for her actions and expressing her love for me. At one point, she even suggested we renew our vows, as if that would magically erase everything. I wanted to believe her, I truly did, but the betrayal was too fresh. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was the woman who had destroyed our marriage for the sake of her own selfish desires. I knew she was hurting, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she had brought this pain upon herself. Meanwhile, my connection with Sarah grew stronger. We weren't officially together, but we spent more time together, and she became a source of comfort and clarity. She didn't pressure me for anything, which was refreshing. She listened when I needed to vent and encouraged me to take care of myself. Being with her made me realize just how much I had been missing in my marriage with Emma. One evening, Emma asked me to go to therapy with her. She said she had already booked a session with a counselor who specialized in repairing broken relationships. I hesitated at first but eventually agreed. If nothing else, I thought it might give me some closure. The first session was tense. Emma broke down several times, admitting to everything and begging for forgiveness. She admitted that she had felt inadequate in our marriage and had sought validation in the worst way possible. The counselor asked me how I felt, and I was brutally honest. I told Emma that her actions had shattered my trust and that I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. We attended a few more sessions, and while Emma seemed to be making progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I began to wonder if I was clinging to the idea of our marriage simply because it was familiar. Then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, I came home to find Emma sitting at the dining table, holding an envelope. She slid it across to me, her hands trembling. I opened it and found a heartfelt letter, along with a printed itinerary for a surprise trip she had planned for us. She explained that she wanted to recreate the honeymoon we never got to have, hoping it would help us reconnect. At first, I was skeptical, but I decided to give it a chance. We left for the trip a week later, and while it was awkward at first, we slowly began to talk more openly. Emma shared her fears, her regrets, and her hopes for the future. She admitted that she had been selfish and short-sighted, and she promised to spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I gave her the chance. For a brief moment, I considered the possibility of rebuilding what we had. But then, on the last night of the trip, everything unraveled. Emma's phone buzzed while she was in the shower. Old habits die hard, and I couldn't resist checking it. What I saw confirmed that my initial suspicions about her motives were correct. She had been texting Ryan again, claiming that our trip was just a formality and that she needed time to secure my forgiveness before making her next move. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me, stronger than anything I had felt before. Any lingering doubts about my next steps vanished in an instant. I packed my bags while Emma was still in the shower, left her a note saying I had seen the messages, and caught an early flight home. When Emma returned to an empty hotel room, she bombarded me with calls and texts, begging for an explanation. I ignored her. By the time she made it back home, I had already spoken to my lawyer and filed for divorce. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. The divorce process was grueling, but I stayed focused on what mattered. I made sure to protect myself financially, and with the evidence of her infidelity, I had the upper hand. Emma tried everything to delay the proceedings, from making emotional pleas to threatening to expose Sarah, but none of it worked. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in years. I was free from the toxicity that had consumed my life. I stayed in touch with Sarah, but I made it clear that I needed time to heal before committing to anything serious. She understood, and for that, I was grateful. Emma, on the other hand, spiraled. She lost her job after her affair with Ryan became public knowledge, and her friends distanced themselves from her. She reached out to me several times, asking for a second chance, but I stood firm. I knew I deserved better than someone who had treated our marriage like an experiment. Looking back, I realized that Emma's actions had forced me to confront my own shortcomings. I had been complacent in our relationship, assuming that love alone was enough to sustain us. But love requires effort, communication, and mutual respect, things that were sorely lacking in our marriage long before she suggested opening it. Now, I'm in a much better place. I've rebuilt my life, focusing on my career, my health, and my happiness. Sarah and I continue to see each other, and while we're taking things slow, I'm optimistic about the future. For anyone reading this who might find themselves in a similar situation, my advice is simple: know your worth. Don't let anyone manipulate you into compromising your values or sacrificing your self-respect. If your partner truly loves and respects you, they won't put you in a position that undermines your trust or your dignity. Life is too short to settle for anything less than a relationship built on honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect. If someone shows you who they truly are, believe them the first time. You deserve a partner who values you as much as you value them, and sometimes, the greatest act of love is learning to let go. My story may have started with betrayal, but it ends with empowerment. I'm living proof that even the darkest chapters of our lives can lead to a brighter future, as long as we have the strength to stand up for ourselves and choose happiness over heartache. That's all for today's video, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more exciting content. See you next time.